Well, this has been an emotional morning. I'm drained already just from hearing that tremendous presentation from Florence, and I picked up one of her boxes. It fell out of her box as Fred was walking away with it. And I can say, Florence, that Greg heard this presentation several months ago. My middle child, our strong-willed child, our cleric child, you know, and he came back to me and said, "Dad, you can't believe how inspiring that presentation was." And of course, I had never heard it. This is the first time I've heard it this morning. And I have noticed a significant difference in Greg's life. Even after that message, that's the power of one message. And then I started thinking about my life and the people that tried to discourage me. And as I look back and realize how many people are negative in our life. And I think of the first time I ever thought of writing a book back in the into the 70s, and I had such a burden to do that. Although I'm a horrible student in school, you know, my teachers would have laughed out loud and doubled up if I had ever suggested that I might someday write a book. Well, I knew that I actually couldn't write it all, you know, final form, but I knew there were writers out there and editors and so on. And with our very first book, we had 7 typists and 4 editors. And we worked 10 weeks in a motel. But you know why I was there? Because my wife gave me giant silver boxes. Keep going. I had a hard time listening to her this morning when I realized that she kept saying to me, "You can do this, you can do that. There's nothing that can keep you from doing that." And of course, I've said to my kids 1,000 times, what it takes in life is knowledge and skills. You can do anything you want. Just get the knowledge and start working on it, you got it. And I've said it forever. And what an inspiration it was for me to hear. Because I remember people saying to me, don't write a book. What a ridiculous, especially on family. That's ridiculous because there's thousands of books out there. Nobody will buy it. Nobody will want to read it. And I kept hearing that from people that really should have been giving me silver boxes. And I had to overcome that because I thought that God had called me to do it, and I wasn't looking for their approval. So it's really whether or not we believe that God is calling us to do those kinds of things. And my encouragement to you today, and my encouragement especially to the men here today, is that we can do it. We can do it. It will take knowledge and it will take skill to do it, but guys, I want you to know we can do it. And I want to give an encouraging word to the men because I see a movement taking place today in our country. There's a movement everywhere I go. I have prayed for 15 years that God would raise up men in this country. And I've never failed to pray that prayer, and I continue to pray it. And in fact, I prayed that God would make me the leader of this group of men for the last 15 years. And every time I come up with the idea to lead men in this nation, my board always votes it down. And that is one thing my wife votes down because she loves me enough to say, "Gary, you could not do that. That's one thing you can't do because God's not called you to be a detailed manager of people and a big organization." She saved my neck a number of occasions by saying, "God's called you to do this and you're great at that, but He's not called you to be an administrator." And I finally, 3 or 4 years ago, realizing what my own personality makeup is, said, "God, I know now that you haven't called me to do that. But God, you can still raise it up through someone else." And so I've been praying for year after year after year. Last spring, not even a year ago now, a man called me from Boulder, Colorado and said, "Can I have lunch with you in Phoenix?" And I was real busy and I said, "I don't have time for that. And I'm doing this and doing that." And so he said, "It's really important, it's urgent that I have lunch with you." And we finally did get together after missing the restaurant and so on in a couple of days. And he said, "Here's what I want to tell you. There's an organization in Boulder, Colorado that's starting up. It's called Promise Keepers. And what it is Coach Bill McCartney, the head football coach of the University of Colorado Buffalo football team, is starting an organization where he wants men, mainly from Colorado, but from all over the nation, who want to come to Boulder. And we're going to make a statement as men. And we're going to make a statement by saying we love God, we want to love God, and we want to love our family. We want to learn what it means to love God, and we want to learn what it means to love our family. And we want to help one another all over this country and then eventually around the world." And I said, "Well, that's what I've been praying for all these years." I said I'd be happy to be involved in that. And I had other things all planned, but I made room for that instantly because this is the very thing I've been praying about. We had 4,300 guys this summer in Boulder, Colorado, and we made a statement to Boulder. And we got up in front of each other and we made a promise to God and to our family that we're going to learn what it takes to be. And this is a movement all happening outside of me. I don't have anything to do with it. I'm just one of the speakers there. I just get to be one of the advisors. I don't have to do any of the organization. I don't have to do any of that stuff. I just get to enjoy the thrill of seeing these men. Well, next summer, guys, and I want to challenge you to consider this and pray about this. Next summer, we're going to have 50,000 men filling the football arena there, where we're going to come and make that statement to the world. It's never been done that we know of in the history of mankind, where 50,000 guys have gotten together. And then the next year, we want to see promise keepers in every state of the Union. And then we want to see it all around the world, because we know that when men are challenged and men are given a specific plan, that when we see that it's possible to do something, we're going to do it. And we want to be those encouragers to men, because basically, it's been my experience for the last 20 years of working with families and couples and singles, and this applies to singles just as much as it does to married couples, that women are pretty much already motivated to be relators. We don't have to get you all charged up to want to love your husband and your children. You buy 80-90% of the marriage books anyway. And you give them to us, and you put them in our path, you know, and we fall over them in the house, and you put them on our pillows, and we say, what's this? And you tell us to read them, and we don't have that same interest that you have, and I know that, and you know it. But what I'm finding today is that men, and it's like a God-given awakening of men all over this nation. Part of this experience of having something like this is the result of the movement that I'm sensing. Now, there's not only a movement in Christian churches, there's a movement in the secular world, as you've read about, where some of these men go out in the woods and beat drums, you know, and those kinds of things. And we're not going to do that, you know, in Colorado. We're going to beat our hearts, you know, and I hope our hearts will beat towards a love for God and a love for our families. And you know what else we're going to do? We are going to encourage one another in every way we can, because we're going to support one another. We're coming to the place where we're not going to beat each other over the head and saying, we're not doing the job, men. We're going to start saying, let's do the job, men, and let's help one another do the job. Let's start, because you know what I'm realizing, men? Whether we like it or not, we are greatly influencing and affecting our wife and kids, whether we know it or not. Everything we say affects them, whether we're giving silver boxes out or discouraging words. Everything we don't say affects them. Everything we do affects them, and everything we don't do. You know that we're in the middle of writing a new book. It's called the power of men, but why men feel so powerless. For years, I felt powerless as a man. I didn't know where I fit in my home. I didn't know why my wife needed me. I didn't know why my children really needed me, the bottom line. Because women can do everything today. There's nothing you can't do that we do. You fix everything. I mean, we used to be able to be the ones in our home that fixed things probably 50, 60 years ago. And so we were needed around the house, you know. And we were, let's say, 80 years ago or so, we were the breadwinners, you know. We were out there earning the income and paying for everything. But today you can do everything. And then a lot of us can't fix anything anyway around the house. So it is complicated today, so we are having a hard time as a man. But I now realize that, guys, we are powerful in our homes. We affect our children, especially our daughters, for the rest of their lives, as we heard this morning, both negative and positive. And we affect our wife, whether we like it or not. They need our arms around them. They need things that only we can give them, but I didn't know this for years and years. And my wife kept telling me this over and over again, and I couldn't hear it for some reason, and I don't understand exactly why it is that we as men don't hear these things, but the bottom line is we don't, basically. This world will be a different place. You look at every major issue today that's social issue, and 80 to 90% of the problem in that area is directly traceable to men and our failure to love as we should. You hear stories like this one where this one business executive said, I understand, okay, I can do something about this. I can learn to love my wife and my kids better. I can do something. He was a strong kind of a leader. He got 6 or 7 other guys together. They bought a marriage book. They started meeting every week, which I highly recommend that all of us do, both men and women. And they started meeting every week about how to improve their marriage. And they got to the section in the book that explains why women appreciate gifts like flowers and cards and, just little things that we don't think usually about as a man. Why women appreciate that so much. And so he said to himself, I can do this. I could do this. And so on his way home from work that day, he bought a real romantic card, flowers, a little gift, came to the door, knocked on the door this time because he wanted to surprise his wife. She comes to the door, and he hands them to her, and he says, hi, honey, I want you to know I love you so much. And she breaks down and starts sobbing. And he thinks to himself, wait a minute, I was just reading how this encourages women. Why is she discouraged? And he said, what's wrong with you? And she said, oh, honey, everything's gone wrong today. She said, the baby's been grouchy and messy all day today. She said, the dishwasher clogged up and flowed all over the carpet. And now you come home drunk. Now, unfortunately, the reason that's funny in our country, anyway, is because aren't we usually in suspect as a man when we do something out of the ordinary that's relational, buy a card, some kind of a book? If she saw us buy a marriage book, she'd feel our forehead to see, if we were had a fever. But you know what? It's really true that men, we tend to miss a lot of these kinds of things. Like most men can pick up Christmas and Valentine's Day, right, because of all the signs all over town. But we are capable of missing a birthday or an anniversary because we're not thinking about that kind of stuff. We're not thinking about the relationship stuff like you are. We're thinking about different kinds of things. Well, what I would like to challenge us today with, and this is all of us because both men and women do this, single, married, we all do this kind of thing. We need to have strong marriages. And I'm excited about the men in this room that are here and saying, I want to learn what it takes to have a strong family, strong relationship. If you're single, a strong friendship, strong relationship with your parents. If you're a parent, strong relationship with your kids. And I'm finding that these relationships take at least 4 consistent ingredients every day, that we give these silver boxes every day to our wife and our kids and to our husband and to our kids and to our friends and to our relatives. And these boxes can be given on a regular basis. In fact, it's almost like, guys, that every woman has like 4 containers inside of her that God designed to have filled up by us in the worldly, earthly relationship. And if it's not filled up, it's kind of like the gas tank gets low and the beeper will go off. Beep, 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 beep. And when it goes off, we are irritated by her behavior or their behavior. And it's amazing the things that go on in our homes. For example, a lot of unnecessary arguments in the home oftentimes come right out of the first one that we could be giving. And this is the great privilege and influence and power that we have as a man to give to every... We interviewed over 10,000 families last year and consistently found these 4 ingredients in every healthy family that we interviewed and surveyed. The first one that we give each other, and really it's a tremendous gift to give each other, is to give unconditional security to each other. Now what that means is asking your wife, and we can even do that right here because we have plenty of time, and asking your husband and asking your kids and asking your friend, for those of you who are single, how often do we need to hear that my mate loves me? How often do we need to hear the words, I love you? Because unconditional security is when you say to your mate, and have a little ceremony if you want at the dinner table or after dinner or some evening or some morning at breakfast, or take her out to dinner or him out to dinner, and have a gift and have a candles and have maybe a special violinist to come and play or whatever, but actually have a little ceremony and say, do you know that I love you more than anyone on this earth? No one means more to me than you. I have chosen this day to love you and be committed to you for the rest of my life. And I may, and you've probably wondered at times, maybe I'm more excited about my work, and maybe I'm more excited about this person over here, or maybe you thought I'm more excited about my kids, but I want you to know that I'm making a covenant with you today. I'm recommitting myself, because this is almost, can be a daily thing when you say, I love you. I want you to know I'm redirecting my affections right now. I'm obeying God. I want you to know I love you. And I want you to know I'm committed for life, and nothing will ever separate us from loving each other. That's exactly what Ephesians 5 says to husbands to do to their wives. Love your wife as Christ loves the church. And in Romans 8 it says nothing will ever separate us from the love of Christ. It's lifetime, 100% commitment. Any degree of insecurity is like the gas tank goes down, and as the gas tank gets lower and lower and lower, the beeper will start to go up, and you'll start getting in all kinds of little hassles and irritated with each other and so on and so forth, and you'll not know why. But you can ask each other once in a while, how much do you think I love you? What did my wife say to me this morning? Right here in a local hotel. How much do you love me? See, years ago, that would have irritated me. It's like the guy who said to his wife one time, "Oh, would you stop asking me? I told you I love you one time. If I ever changed my mind, I'll let you know." You know, that's not it. It's saying it on a regular basis. You know where I learned a lot of this stuff? In small groups. I would encourage every one of you who wants your life. In fact, I brought this with me today. I was up real early this morning exercising, getting ready for this, and thinking about you and praying for you and everything else. And I picked out two things, second and third page of your local newspaper. Look what it says here. And all of us from time to time can recognize this. See if you recognize this person. I recognize my own shortcomings, the faults in the conduct of my private life. Did you read that this morning? His face sort of bowed towards the lectern at Harvard he was speaking. This was yesterday. I realize that I alone am responsible for them, and I am the one who must confront them. He says, I cannot promise that I will fulfill every expectation that you have of me, even my own, he said, but I want to start trying. He says, we must struggle to make this world better, but we also must struggle to make ourselves better. You know who that is? That is Edward Kennedy. Can you believe it? Now, I just want to have a special message to Mr. Kennedy this morning. First of all, I doubt very much that he's going to change unless two things happen. There's the same two things that Chuck Colson say must happen when a person wants to change. Same two things that I have seen have to happen before people really make significant, lasting changes. The power of God's Spirit in our life, activating that energy to be able to do this. That's number one. And second is a support group around us on a weekly basis. Other people who love us enough to say, I'll hold you accountable to that commitment. I'd love to write him from time to time and say, how you doing on making your life better? And is the power of God active in your life? Because it's probably not going to happen. Is that true? Absolutely. Every husband in this room today who says, I want my life to count, I want to have the power to give these boxes to my wife and kids, I want to start giving security to my wife and my kids, I want to be that significant person in my family's life that God called me to be. It's probably not going to happen, guys, unless you avail yourself to the power of God, unless you get into some kind of a small group. For the last 10 years, my staff and I have been writing a small group curriculum called Homes of Honor. I saw only about 10 or 15 sets here, and I want to apologize for that. But it's all designed to take the material that I have for you to hold each other accountable in a small group and to support one another. Because when I was in Waco, Texas, over a 3-year period, we never saw a divorce in any one of the groups that we had because the mammoth amount of support we were giving each other, what we were really giving, as I realize now, is silver boxes to each other. We were encouraging each other. We were saying, you can do it. We're here to help you. We were giving the kind of support the very Word of God says we ought to be doing to one another on a daily basis. No wonder we're not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. One of those very couples in Texas, we were just together as a group a few weeks ago and all laughing together about the stories we had when we were together. We're still great friends because small groups bring great friends. And I highly recommend, if you're not in one, to seriously pray about God opening one for you. If you want your family, if we're going to have this, in fact, look at here. Here's our past president, Jimmy Carter. Listen to what he says right here. Our current social condition is intolerable, if not fatal. For the future good of our nation, we cannot allow our common life to deteriorate any further. I say hearty amen to that. And guys, the bottom line is either we get our act together and support one another, or it is not going to happen. It's as simple as that. Because we can look around and realize that we are a major factor in seeing revival and awakening coming to our churches today. We can no longer play games. We have to say, let's help one another do this very thing. We can't point our fingers at each other. I'm who I am today largely because of my mom and dad. But I know that a lot of times my dad was discouraging to me. Not my mom so much, but my dad was. It was just reversed in my life as Florence's. And my dad was an angry person, discouraging kind of person. I knew he was going out on my wife with other women. And I didn't get a chance to see a real example in my home. I used to see my dad, you talk about disrespect around my house. My dad used to throw the napkin down at the table at the dinner and get up and say, I'm getting out of here. No, there's no respect around this house. And all the kids would say, yeah, get out of here. That was my home. I didn't have an example. I am now realizing that I cannot dig up my dad's grave and take his bones and chop them up and beat them on the ground and say, how dare you treat me like this? What I have to say is, thank God for my dad, and start looking for the things my dad did build into me. Look at the negative things he did and then say, God, thank you for showing me those things, because now, God, what I want you to do with my friend's help is I want to break that cycle that my dad had in my life. Because the scripture says that the sins of the fathers are visited unto 4 generations. So my dad didn't have, maybe my dad's dad, who I never knew, maybe he was abusive to my dad. I don't know. Maybe he never gave Florence, maybe he never gave my dad any silver boxes. So what can my dad give me? I'm done blaming people, ladies and gentlemen. I am now here today to say that I am 100% responsible for me with applying guests. We have got to stop blaming our past, blaming our social condition, blaming our relatives, and say, let's get our act together as we understand it best we can, and let's help one another get it together. Instead of discouraging each other, and there's where this silver box comes in, because we ought to be praising each other for even the slightest effort of becoming more of what God wants us to do. I'll never forget this one night in our small groups in our home. And out of this small group came our program called Homes of Honor. This one husband came in. They'd only been married about, probably 3 or 4 years, sat down on my couch in my living room. There were 10 couples in my living room. I did this 3 nights a week, ladies and gentlemen, with 30 couples. And at times, it wasn't a pleasant experience. But I knew we could learn together, and I knew we were going to figure this out one way or the other, because I knew no matter how discouraging the world would make us appear, we could find it somehow. And so I remember as the leader of the group, his wife came in a few minutes later, her eyes were all red and puffy, and I knew that he had probably offended her just before the meeting started, because I knew they were having struggles anyway, like some of the couples in our group, and I was with my wife from time to time at that time, and still do from time to time. And so I thought, well, I opened in prayer, and I'll start with him, get it over with, as soon as we can here. So I said, you want to talk about how you're doing this week? He said, horrible. I said, you want to explain it to us? He said, yeah, I do. He said, you know what? I've been thinking about getting out of this marriage group, but I'm changing my mind. I want out of my marriage. I can't stand living with this woman another week. I mean, there was tension in my living room. Instantaneously, the women all did the same thing. They all glared at him and went to her to comfort her. And instantly, we men, we all did the same thing. We all looked at each other and thought, now what do we do? Because we didn't know what to do. And so I was the leader of the group, and so I said, let's close in prayer. Which is exactly what I did. I closed in prayer because it was so heavy there was no way we could go on. And I talked to that man the next day for 3 hours, and you know what he and I learned together? We learned that the very things he hated about his wife, not all of them, but the very main things he disliked about his wife, he was partly responsible for producing. He never spent any time talking to her. He was abusive to her. He used to come home and check the house to see how clean it was. And I said, give me an example. He says, well, the other morning at 6 o'clock, I was up vacuuming the house. And she got up in the morning and said, what was I doing? And I said, I'm sick and tired of living in this pig pen. I said to him right in this restaurant, I said, do you think that motivates your wife to clean house? And he said, well, somebody's got to tell her. I said, do you realize that we men do not even realize at times that that doesn't motivate women? But there are men who think it does. Is it any wonder that God says in Genesis 2:18 that it's not good that man should dwell alone? That God created a woman to be our completer? Do you know that, guys, if you are single or not doing well with your wife, that you have up to a 6-time greater chance of a heart attack, heart failure, or of some kinds of cancer? if you're not relating with your wife like God designed us to be? Do we know how to relate as well as women? No, we do not. Did God give us somebody who knows? Yes, he did. I have yet to meet a woman anywhere in the world who does not know where your marriage relationship is today from 0 to 10 and what it would take to move it from wherever it is up closer to 10. I've never met a woman who doesn't know that. It's built in her. If you let it come out gently and tenderly, she can help us figure that out. It's amazing what God has given women. And I'm not the one that wrote Genesis 2:18, but I have a great deal of admiration and respect for women. I stand before you and I stand before men and because God has given us everything it takes, guys, to be great lovers. You just have to find out what it is to be a great lover, and then we can do it. And that's part of the movement that I see going today. Give her security. It's a great, and we need security too, ladies. So you need to tell us you love us because we need the same things you do. Your kids need those things. The second thing, as our time moves along, I was going to take my watch off, but we have this gigantic watch right here behind me. You know what it means when a Baptist minister takes his watch off and puts it on the pulpit on Sunday morning? Absolutely nothing. The second ingredient that every healthy, growing relationship needs is regular, meaningful communication. Florence said it beautifully today. You have to talk to each other. You have to listen to each other. Find out from your husband and your wife and your kids and your friend, if you're single, find out who they are. What are their dreams? Find out ways of encouraging them. We need praise as much as anyone else does. One of the greatest needs of a man is to feel adequate. Guess what? Some women have a great knack of being able to make us feel inadequate. You know how you do this, ladies? And I know you don't realize this a lot of times, and I'm not picking on you in the sense of saying this is a weakness in you. It's one of your, it's a great strength you have, and I think sometimes it's used without you realizing it can discourage us. And that is, you have the capacity to make 250,000 facial expressions. And some of those facial expressions are like this. You know, when you say this to your husband, when are you going to get with the program? See, sometimes the average husband doesn't even know what the program is, let alone know how to get with it, okay? And you make us feel like we should know what you know, and basically we do not see the same relational things you see. And if you don't encourage us in every area that you can, in any effort that we make, I'll never forget the time that I was running one time, a short distance runner. Now from time to time more, I'm a stepper. You know, I have a little stepper every day I use for a half hour. But one time in Waco, I was running in the streets of Waco, and I thought of something relational I could do for Norma. I thought I'd come home and surprise her. She could go to breakfast with Helen, and I'll pack the camper, and then when she gets back from breakfast, we can go camping together. Doesn't that sound like a sensitive thing, guys? I mean, I thought it was. And so I got home and I said, I have a surprise for you. And she said, what? I said, how would you like me to pack the camper today? And then you can go to breakfast with Helen, your best friend. And when you get home, the camper will be back. We can go to camping. What do you think? And she got upset with me. And I couldn't believe it. It irritated me, guys. I have to be honest with you. I thought, how in the world can anybody be irritated with such a loving idea? You know what she was thinking? She thought that I had premeditated during my run a creative way of getting her out of the house so I could finally pack the camper in the right way. I mean, I'm a sanguine. I mean, that's the last thing on earth I would have thought of, you know, is having the camper. I don't care how the camper is packed, basically. And so it actually irritated me so much, I felt like saying, okay, I'll go to breakfast with Helen, you pack the camper. That's what I felt like saying. You know what I mean? Don't you feel that way sometimes, guys? When you try your best, and a woman sometimes will say, is that your best shot? And the reason is because you think we are as skilled as you are in the relational world, and all the tests show that we are not. But we can become with encouragement. But we are not tending to go in that direction if we don't get encouragement. You've got to learn to encourage us. Even if it looks like we're going to do something relational, it looks like we're about to have a meaningful conversation with you, praise us for it. Instead of discouraging us because we're not as skilled as you are, and that's really the bottom line. I mean, what happens when we do things like this? A woman will say, and Florence mentioned this, but a woman will say, let's go shopping together. Well, the average husband will hear the word shopping. What does the average woman mean? Shopping, right? Okay? There's a tremendous difference oftentimes with men and women, and that sometimes shows it up. You'll go to the mall and you're looking for a jacket. You're with your wife. And what does the average man want to do? He wants to look for the jacket stores right away. You might want to sit down maybe and talk for a while. It's really hard for us to concentrate, right? Because when we go to a jacket store, what do we want to do? We don't like, you can try on a few of them, but we want you to buy one eventually, right? But oftentimes you might want to go to the next store, and the third store, and the fourth store and look at jackets. It's so hard for us because oftentimes we are not shopping for jackets. We are hunting for jackets. What we want to do is shoot the jacket, bag it, and get out of there. Is that right? Okay? And so what's happening, right? Now, what you may want to do is have a meaningful conversation in the middle of that. If you don't understand how different we are, you may first have to buy the jacket, and then we can sit down and relax. And then have a conversation with you. But see, we're not always aware that meaningful conversation is that important in a vital, healthy relationship. But guys, whether we like it or not, it is. If we don't know how to have it, let's go to either a counselor. Only the wise seek counsel. We either have to go to a counselor or go to a training class. I talked to a gentleman yesterday in my workshop who said, I went to a class to figure out who I am and who my wife is because I want to learn how to communicate to her. My hat is off to that man. Because that man values his wife and his family enough to do something about. And if you don't have security and meaningful conversation, I can tell you guys, your marriage is going to brown out just like one of these plants down here, and the leaves are going to start falling off. And 10 to 20 years from now, you're not going to have what you wished you had. You can't substitute this. You have to give it, or it starts to go downhill. The gas tank has to be filled, or it doesn't work. The third gas tank, the third thing is emotional bonding. That's with relational things like candlelight dinners. It's taking a walk together at night, you know. Sometimes just holding hands. It's talking while you're doing that. It's sharing your feelings. A lot of guys don't know how they feel, but you can come in touch with your feelings. Anything that it takes to have a great marriage, guys, everything necessary God will give you, and you can learn with a small group, or you can learn from a book, you can learn from videos, films. There's a jillion things available today. There's counselors coming out our ears today that can help us. And some of them are great. Some of them aren't, so find out, you know, the person's reputation. Don't just go to any old counselor, because some counselors that I counsel are sicker than we are. So you have to know who you're going to. So check them out. But the information is there. If you want a relationship somewhere between 0 and 10, up close to 10, that's the best. It's available to you guys. It's there, and it's mutually satisfying if you want it. I remember the time that use every experience to bond. And I remember the time, and I can make this short, that I drove into my driveway, and I noticed that our mini motorhome was parked at an angle, and Norma had sheared off a big section of the roof because the outside, you know, is much, you know, the cab was narrower. And so I knew where she was, somewhere in the house, and I said, what am I going to do right now as a man? What does my wife need? Here's where I oftentimes use the pillow. My wife right now needs a silver box, and to my wife right then what it would have been is a touch, a tender hug. That's what she needs. I knew that. But before I actually could figure this out, I'm sitting there with my son Greg thinking about what am I going to do? I'm going to see my wife any second. And Greg said, Dad, why don't you do what you teach? And I thought, that's a novel idea. I could do that. So I got out of the car, and as soon as I started walking towards this puzzle of the roof all over the driveway, she came running around the side of the house, and she started crying instantly. She said, look what I did. I wrecked the camper and the roof, you know. And she said, I told the neighbors across the street, and they're watching to see how you're going to respond. And so all I did was put my arms around her and hold her, and I just tenderly held her and told her I loved her and said, you know that I love you a lot more than campers and roofs. Now, at the time, I didn't even realize what I was giving her was a silver box. Did I feel like doing it, guys? No, I did not feel initially. In fact, what I felt like doing was going, okay? You know the feeling, but you see, just because we feel it doesn't mean we have to do it, right? We want to do what's right. As Florence quoted that verse in Ephesians, don't let any unwholesome word proceed out of your mouth. Only that which is edifying, that builds up, that ministers grace to the hearer, strength and energy. How many women here would it say out with your hands raised, when you're hurting or frustrated or angry or whatever, would you love your husband to come over and put both arms around you, just hold you tenderly and listen to what you're going through? How many of you would appreciate that? Is that a silver box to you? Yes, it is. Did I know that? No, guys, I didn't know that. My wife told me one time she loves to talk about a vacation almost more than taking it. Does that make sense to me? No. But if it means it to her, then I'll talk about it. Because, see, I want to know everything I can. And then the fourth gas tank that's in every relationship that has to be full, both men and women, is the physical gas tank. There must be physical touch on a regular basis. About 80% of a woman's physical need is non-sexual. I'll say that one more time. Non-sexual. About 80% is just to be held, touched, kissed, holding hands. Guys, that is what we do to fill that need in her life. That's the silver box to her, is touching. What if you didn't come from a touching home? You're going to tend not to touch then. But that doesn't mean you can't touch. You can learn to touch. Because that's one of the great, great strengths of a man, is to hug the people in his life. And sexually, as you know, men are sort of like microwave ovens. You know, testosterone-loaded males, boom, we're turned on in a hurry. Women are not like that sexually. Women are more like crock pots, right? They warm up to that experience only if there is a great relationship. If there's communication and security and romance and bonding. See, the camper experience in our driveway bonded us. Use every experience you have in your home to bond you emotionally. Everything can be used for good if you look for it. Because if we don't have security, conversation, bonding, and touch on a regular basis, our relationship starts going downhill. And guys, we can give that. And if any of you are interested in Promise Keepers this summer, the last weekend in July, tear out a piece of paper and put your name and address and put PK or Promise Keepers and leave them at the edge of your chairs or up here or somewhere, and I'll gather them up, send them to Colorado. I can organize at least that. And then they will mail you a brochure and explain it to you. And I know from last year it'll affect your life, and you'll be a part of a network worldwide eventually to encourage other men to become everything that God intended us to be. Let's close in prayer. Father in heaven, we love you and thank you for life. Thank you for the privilege of being here and sharing these ideas, Lord. We love you. Thank you for Florence and her heart, her inspiration. We just thank you for this privilege. In your precious name we pray. Amen.